The Supreme Court had oral arguments for a case that centers on some fishermen, commercial fishermen, small businesses, I believe in Rhode Island and New Jersey. Due to a federal law regulation, they are required to be monitored in their fishing every day.
Them too.
And so these federal government monitors have to be on their fishing boats every day, and then they have to pay for the privilege of having those federal government monitors on their boats every day. These folks have sued the federal government saying, this isn't in the law that we have to pay for this. This wasn't passed by Congress. The issue with this, and it's going to be a fairly big deal to the federal government, is that the reason the federal government could force them to pay for this, even though it wasn't in the law, is there's something called Chevron Deference, which comes from a 40-year-old case called Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, that says basically that courts should defer to an agency's reasonable interpretation of an ambiguous statute.
That's right.
This has led to many decades of Congress just going, let's do this, and then deferring to experts allegedly and reg writers and all the folks who are unelected and often unaccountable in the various agencies to say what that means. And then when they're challenged, they go, Chevron said we can do this.
Right. So what's interesting is not only does it involve statutes that are perceived to be ambiguous, but determining what those statutes are itself is kind of ambiguous.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, these federal agencies,
like
these federal agencies are like, well, we consider that to be ambiguous, and citing 84, Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, we'll handle it from here. And courts are just like, fine, you can do that. But the big fear the Biden administration says, of course, is that this will, if this happens, right? And it could probably be like a 6-3 decision, quite possibly with Brett Kavanaugh maybe leading the charge. It's going to be chaos. But that's not a reason not to challenge something that is considered to be wrong or wrongly argued.
Right. Much like with the overturning of
Roe v.
right?
Wade, which, by the way, the abortions are still happening.
No,
this whole thing.
Well, I heard somebody say on the news the other day about when Roe was overturned and the national ban on abortion. It's like, that's not a real thing. That didn't happen.
It's where the handmaidens.
Point being, despite the logistical and political fallout of such a decision, I think it would be the correct decision that Congress should be making the rules and not deferring to these agencies over and over and over again with tremendous power. So it says, this is SCOTUS blog writing on it. After more than 3.5 hours of oral argument on Wednesday, it seemed unlikely that the rule outlined in that case, known as the Chevron Doctrine, will survive in its current form. A majority of the justices seemed ready to jettison the doctrine, or at least very significantly limit it. The court's ruling would have ripple effects across the federal government, where agencies frequently use highly trained experts to interpret and implement federal laws. Although the doctrine was relatively non-controversial when it was first introduced in 1984, in recent years, conservatives, including some members of we pounced, guys. Yeah. Some members of the Supreme Court have called for it to be overruled. The folks, the fishermen, of course, are quite sympathetic figures, and their story is sympathetic. Those who say that Chevron is amazing say that this is just this is a backdoor way for big corporations to avoid environmental regulations. But I would just like the people who we elect to do the thing that they're supposed to do. And this is part of a generation-long pattern of Congress going, we don't really want to do those things.
Right.
We'll have someone else do
I'll tell you, what surprised, I was really surprised because I didn't think that people really cared that much about the Atlantic herring except for me. I love herring and cream sauce. So
this is a case made for Vic.
Man, the herring is so delicious. That's the first thing. The second thing is, based on my experience as a legal correspondent on the much missed Right and Writer podcast, it might not just be an outright reversal, but rather a sort of reinterpretation of something called the Administrative Procedures Act. So, there'll be some gray area, but it could be somewhere in between is all I'm saying. The other thing that is really interesting and was brought to my attention by my colleague Colin Anderson, which is, do you know who seems to be absolutely obsessed with the Chevron deference?
No.
Ron DeSantis. Apparently, I wouldn't have known this because I was not able to tune into his announcement with Elon Musk that he was running for president. If you remember, that was all sorts of technical glitches. Yes. But one of the things he said in his announcement was that one of the first things he wants to deal with is the Chevron Deference.
No, it does not surprise me at all that DeSantis is deeply engaged
totally
on Chevron Deference.
Yeah.
A note this is from Reason Magazine, saying the dispute at the center of these lawsuits is real. It illustrates how vulnerable Americans are to whims of federal agencies empowered to invent their own authority. Mm-hmm. The plaintiffs are family-owned businesses that cannot easily bear the financial burden imposed by the requirement that they not only make room on their cramped boats for observers monitoring compliance with fishery regulations, but also pay for that dubious privilege. They also note the Department of Veterans Affairs took advantage of the same Chevron doctrine to deny a disabled veteran 3 years of benefits it owed him, relying on an arbitrary rule it invented for its own convenience. So you can see how if you are a small business person or if you are someone subject to a regulation, the idea that like a handful of experts at Department of Energy or Veteran Affairs or wherever it is can just be like, this is what we think the law is.
Right.
Seems like a problem.
Yeah.
So sorry, Congress, you might have to do your actual
jobs
more frequently. I know you're not good at doing even like keeping the government running, but you know, we got some more things for your plate. The thing is, it's supposed to be hard to pass stuff. That's how it's supposed to work. And
that's right.
Liberals who like a lot of stuff passed sort of bypass the idea that the founders had that we should not pass a bunch of things. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I know who can do it. Like Toby over at Department of HUD. He'll handle it.
Or some executive decision. Somebody.
Anyway, people are going to flip out a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a segment of nerds that's going to lose their minds over this.
Yes, it'll be the worst thing since the end of net neutrality.
Oh, yeah, we all died.
We all
Remember,
died.
we all died.
That's right. Citizens United.
It's
we
true.
all